The universe is vast, but silence is vaster. For months, my ship, the Vigilant, drifted through that silence, its hull creaking under cosmic frost and the whisper of radiation storms. I wasn't supposed to be out here. The edge of the Perseid expanse is an astronomer's graveyard, a region so empty that light itself seems to give up halfway through. But something had called me here, a faint, rhythmic pulse my instruments barely detected, repeating every 13 hours. Too regular to be natural, too ancient to belong to anything known. I told myself it was curiosity, but truthfully, it was obsession. My father used to tell me bedtime stories about the architects, a race that supposedly built the first stars. My colleagues called it myth. I called it destiny. So when a signal appeared, pulsing like a heartbeat from an uncharted system, I followed it, even when the others refused to come. After 3 months of travel, I reached a dying sun, a red dwarf on its last breath, surrounded by a field of shattered moons and dark matter scars. The system's only planet was barely holding together, its crust fractured like broken glass. Yet the signal came from beneath it, something alive, humming beneath extinction. I began descent. The ship's scanners couldn't penetrate the crust. No readings, no atmosphere, no logic, just that same steady pulse. I adjusted the Vigilant's shields and pushed into the thin upper mantle. It felt like diving into a frozen ocean of dust. The planet resisted me, magnetic interference spiking, alarms flaring, until, abruptly, everything went quiet. The sensors cleared. My ship had entered a void within the planet itself. And there, in that impossible cavern, floated a city, miles across, perfectly preserved. The first glimpse stole my breath. Towers of translucent crystal stretched into the cavern ceiling, suspended by invisible energy. Bridges of light connected spires like veins through a sleeping giant. The architecture seemed organic, grown rather than built, its geometry both alien and familiar. And at the heart of it all, a colossal structure that could only be called a throne. I landed on what appeared to be a courtyard of obsidian glass. My boots echoed. The air shimmered faintly, charged with static, almost like the world was breathing. My instruments blinked nonsense readings, temperatures fluctuating by hundreds of degrees, gravity bending around invisible anchors. I reached for my recorder. Expedition Log 2219-B. Dr. Elias Marr reporting. Location: unknown subterranean structure. Possible pre-cataclysm civilization. Architecture appears self-repairing. Energy signatures suggest continuity across millennia. I think this is it. The empire everyone thought was myth. As I spoke, I realized my voice sounded small, fragile against the silence of the place. I advanced deeper, along the walls. Reliefs depicted figures made of light, shaping stars with their hands. One image caught my attention, a being standing over a circle of kneeling figures, rays of energy streaming from his chest. Beneath the image, a symbol glowed faintly, a spiral made of interlocking circles. I'd seen it before on the pulse signature that led me here. Then came the sound, a low hum, rising and falling like the exhale of a sleeping creature. The ground beneath me trembled softly. My translator pinged, not with words, but patterns, as if the city itself was trying to communicate. I followed the hum toward the throne. The chamber was vast beyond comprehension. The throne wasn't just a seat. It was an entire structure of living machinery. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the signal. The closer I got, the more my vision blurred, like the air between me, and it was distorting reality. I reached out a hand, and the world awakened. Light flooded the chamber, blinding white and gold. My suit system screamed warnings as energy surged through me. The hum became a chorus. The ground rippled beneath my feet, the walls shifting like breathing lungs. The reliefs along the corridor came alive. Figures stepping out of stone, their crystalline forms flickering like ghosts. Then silence again. My breath echoed. A voice, deep and resonant, vibrated through my skull, not from outside, but inside my mind. The Maker has returned. The breath of the infinite walks once more. I froze. My translator identified no source, no frequency. It wasn't sound. It was thought, A figure emerged from behind the throne, tall, radiant, its form composed of living light. It moved with impossible grace, each step leaving ripples in the air. When it spoke again, I felt the words resonate in my bones. We have slept beyond the death of suns. We dreamed of your return, architect. Before I could react, the figure knelt. And then, around me, hundreds, thousands of others began to appear. From the walls, the floor, the pillars, beings of crystal and light, humanoid in shape but utterly alien in presence. They gathered in concentric circles, their bodies shimmering in soft hues. One by one they bowed, kneeling before me. We are the Serity, the Empire Eternal. We have awaited you. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. No, I'm not. I'm human. I'm not who you think I am. But the words barely left my lips before the figure before me. Their leader, perhaps, reached out, and the air around me shimmered like liquid. The Serathe's voice softened. Your form changes with the cycle of creation. Flesh, light, dust, all one. You are the source reborn, the breath that gave us being. Welcome home. My suit registered a surge of energy, identical to human bioelectric frequency, emanating from the being's touch. My DNA was reacting to it. The impossible reading scrolled across my visor. It was as if my body recognized them. No, I whispered, this can't be real. But everywhere I looked, the impossible was happening. The city's towers began to glow, awakening one by one, cascading waves of energy into sky above the cavern. The pulse, the same rhythm I'd followed for months, now beat in perfect sync with my heartbeat. The Serity began to sing, a haunting harmonic resonance that vibrated through the air, filling the cavern with light. My ship's instruments recorded every frequency, but none matched known physics. The sound wasn't merely heard. It was felt, altering the very molecules in the air. At the center of the chamber, the great throne shifted. The luminous being gestured to it and spoke with reverence. The seat of breath awaits. The cycle begins anew. I could only stare, trembling. My mind raced between scientific logic and primal awe. Could this be technology so advanced it appears divine? Or was it truly something beyond comprehension? My thoughts spiraled. What if they were right? What if some part of me, buried deep within human evolution, carried the echo of something older, something that built them? I didn't know. But I did know one thing. When I touched the throne, it responded. The light rose from the floor, wrapping around my arm like a living ribbon. Energy surged through me. Not pain, not warmth, but recognition. The Serity bowed lower. The leader's voice resonated through the chamber one last time. All hail the architect reborn. The god of breath, returned to restore the stars. And as the city shuddered with renewed life, I realized with chilling clarity. I hadn't discovered forgotten empire. I had just awakened it. The city hadn't stopped glowing since I touched the throne. Every tower, every bridge of living crystal pulsed in harmony with my heartbeat, as if the entire civilization had synchronized itself to me. For hours, the Serity knelt in silence. Then, slowly, they began to move again. One among them, taller than the rest, her body composed of translucent facets, shimmering with pale blue light, stepped forward. Her face was humanoid, but her eyes held galaxies. When she spoke, her voice carried music within it. I am Serenly, voice of the choir eternal, high keeper of the architect's song. Her words vibrated in the air, each syllable resonating like chimes made of stars. She bowed low. You have returned, as it was written in the crystal. I took a step back, struggling to breathe. You're making a mistake. I said, I'm not your architect. I'm not a god. She tilted her head, the light within her dimming slightly, almost like a frown. You speak in humility as you did before. Your tone, your resonance, your pattern, all match the records of your last incarnation. You are the breath-given form. Her confidence terrified me more than her reverence. I glanced at my suit's readings, still fluctuating wildly. The air around me was dense with exotic energy. My DNA signatures were spiking, responding to something in the atmosphere. Every time I denied her words, the energy flared, as though the world itself disagreed. Sara raised her hand, and the ground before me split open, not with violence, but grace. A platform of light rose from beneath the floor, displaying swirling holograms of stars, planets, and great cities made of crystal. "These are your creations," she said softly. "The Sarati Empire. We spread across the stars under your guidance. We were the keepers of balance, the weavers of order, until you vanished." The holograms shifted to images of chaos, planets shattering, stars imploding, vast fleets burning. When the breath ceased, the cycle fell into silence. We withered. For eons, we waited beneath the void for your pulse to return. I watched, unable to look away. The holograms felt more like memories than projections. The way they shimmered, the faint ache they stirred in my chest. It was as if something within me recognized them. "No," I muttered. "That can't be. I was born on Mars. I'm human. I have parents. Sara Lee stepped closer. "And yet, your genetic signature carries the breath frequency, the mark of creation. No mortal could awaken us. Elias Mars soul." My name echoed oddly when she said it, like it didn't belong in her mouth. "How do you know my name?" "The city does," she said simply. "It remembers." She turned toward the great throne, the seat of breath, as they called it. "This chamber is your nexus, the throne of echoes. It records the architect's resonance across every incarnation. Would you see what it remembers?" Every rational instinct screamed at me to refuse. But curiosity, that damned human flaw, has always been my curse. "Show me." She placed her palm against the throne. The world dissolved. In an instant, I stood in another body, another time. My vision burned white and gold. Around me, endless fleets of crystal ships hovered over an ocean of stars. I felt power coursing through my veins, not mechanical, not magical, but elemental. I spoke, and galaxies shifted. I commanded, and the void obeyed. Beside me stood Sara Lee, or someone who looked like her light brighter, her tone more reverent. "Architect," she said, kneeling. "The cycle completes." And I, or whoever I had been, looked down at my hand and whispered, "No, the cycle is broken." The memory shattered like glass. I fell to my knees back in the chamber, gasping. My head throbbed. Images of alien stars and dying empires flashed in my vision. Sara Lee watched silently. "You see," she said softly, "you carry fragments of what you were. The echoes remain." I stared at her. "If that was real, then I destroyed you. Didn't I?" Her light flickered. "You ended the age to prevent the greater silence. We were becoming gods without mercy. You left to be reborn, to learn mortality once more." The room tilted around me. "You're saying I chose to die. You chose to become human." The words hit me harder than I expected. I thought of my small, fragile life, of books, hunger, mistakes, laughter, and pain. All those human things I took for granted, and now they were being framed as lessons, not accidents. If she was right, humanity wasn't just an accident of evolution. It was a redemption arc written into the universe itself. Sara Lee extended her hand. "Come, the choir waits. They must see their maker returned." I hesitated, but the look in her faceted eyes, pure reverence and hope, broke my resistance. I followed her into the light. We emerged into a vast open chamber, where thousands of Sarati gathered, rows upon rows, each radiating a different hue of living light. The chamber pulsed like the inside of a star. When they saw me, they knelt again, their harmonic voices rising in a chorus, so haunted it made my skin crawl. The breath has returned. The cycle begins anew. Sara Lee raised her arms. "Behold the architect of breath, the god of creation reborn." The silence ends the night. Their song intensified, shaking the air itself. I wanted to tell them to stop, to tell them I wasn't their god, but the words caught in my throat. Every protest felt weaker than the awe I felt around them, because as their song continued, I felt the same pulse again, inside me, through me. The towers outside flared brighter. Energy waves cascaded through the city. Systems long dead for millennia reactivated. And for a fleeting moment, I did feel divine. Hours passed like minutes. The Cerity led me through chambers filled with relics, machines the size of continents, orbiting stars in holographic form. Each device resonated when I neared, as if recognizing its maker. One structure was a garden of glowing plants, suspended in zero gravity, each leaf humming like a tuning fork. Another was a forge of light, where energy condensed into solid matter at my touch. Serenely watched my every reaction. Your creations remember your essence. They obey your thought. I touched one of the machines, a crystalline orb. It flared, releasing an image of stars forming from dust. I whispered, "You said I built the Cerity. Why?" "To give voice to silence," Serenly replied. "The universe was endless but empty. You breathed consciousness into the void." Her voice softened. "But in doing so, you made us too perfect. We forgot what it meant to struggle, to err, to grow. You saw what we had become and vanished into mortality, to learn again the meaning of imperfection." I stared at my reflection in the crystal. My human face looked small, fragile, yet somehow connected to something unimaginably vast. "And now that I'm back?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, then knelt again. "You must guide us once more. Restore the Empire. Bring balance to the stars. The galaxy remembers your silence. Others will come. They will see our rebirth as threat. You must lead us before they strike." The enormity of her words crushed me. Me, a man who could barely manage his own life, was being asked to rebuild a civilization that once ruled galaxies. But the machines responded to me. The light obeyed me. The universe seemed to recognize me. And in that moment, standing before the luminous ruins of an empire that thought I was its god, a terrifying thought settled into my heart. What if they were right? Power changes the way silence sounds. Before, silence was a hum of empty space outside my ship. Now, it was the sound of 1,000 crystalline beings waiting for my next breath. Every word I spoke became law. Every hesitation sparked new theology. The Cerity had crowned me their god, and I would still try to remember how to be human. Days, if time even moved the same here, passed as the empire reawakened. The great towers of the capital rose higher, rebuilt by living machines that bent light into matter. The skies shimmered with auroras that pulsed in rhythm with the city's new heartbeat, my own. Each sunrise felt like an act of creation, and each night I feared the dawn. Serenly stayed close, serving as both translator and guardian. She taught me how the Cerity worshipped through resonance, songs that carried emotion as physical force. When they sang of devotion, the air thickened with warmth. When they sang of sorrow, the walls wept faint light. To them, belief wasn't abstract. It was a tool that shaped reality. They asked me to teach them again, to show them what the new cycle should be. I tried. I told them about Earth, about humanity's fragility, about kindness, forgiveness, and the beauty of imperfection. My words confused them. "You speak of limitation as virtue," Serenly said. "How can weakness be sacred?" "Because it's what makes us real," I told her. "Perfection is sterile. It kills growth. We learn through failure." She tilted her crystalline head, her light dimming in thought. "Then the architect returns not to command, but to teach." That was the first time I saw uncertainty in her eyes. Weeks later, I began exploring the outer districts. The Cerity had reactivated their orbiting platforms, vast rings that encircled the world like halos. They called them the choirs of creation. Each one could bend gravity, forge matter, even rewrite atomic structures. Their purpose had once been peaceful, to balance star systems, to seed life. But as I toured them, I sensed a more dangerous potential. One platform, the third choir, contained weapons, stellar lances that could pierce planets. Serenly admitted they were used during the Empire's fall. "We built them to protect your design," she said quietly. "But without your breath to temper us, protection became conquest." Her words struck deep. I saw echoes of humanity's own path, how easily survival turns to domination. "Deactivate them," I ordered. The choir obeyed. Its light dimmed, the weapons sleeping once more. But not all were pleased. That evening, an emissary came to me, a Cerity unlike the others, his body darker, his energy sharp and restless. He called himself Varen, commander of the luminous host. "You dim our power when the galaxy stirs against us," he said. "Already the outer colonies have heard the pulse. They will come to challenge your return. Shall we greet them as slaves or corpses?" "I don't want either," I said. "There's been enough death." He laughed, a harsh metallic sound. "Mercy is a disease of flesh. You were not born to bend the knee." When I didn't answer, he stepped closer. "Perhaps you truly are human now." Soft, tainted by decay. Sara moved between us, her voice cold. "Watch your tone before the architect." But the damage was done. I saw in Varen's eyes a seed of rebellion. Worship built on fear doesn't last forever. That night I couldn't sleep. The city's lights flickered in restless waves, echoing the tension I felt inside. I stood on the balcony of the throne hall and stared at the stars. Somewhere out there, fleets were already on their way, machines and civilizations older than humanity, drawn by the resurrection of a god they once feared. And I wondered, was this how the first architect had felt before everything burned? The answer came not in thought, but memory. Dreams that weren't mine haunted me. I saw myself him, the original architect, standing amid collapsing worlds. The Saradi had become monsters of light, consuming everything. To end the cycle, he'd poured his essence into the breath engine, scattering fragments of himself into the flow of time. I woke gasping, my skin glowing faintly with the same gold hue I'd seen in the visions. My body was changing. Sara found me at dawn, her voice trembling. "The throne resonates with your awakening. You are remembering." "Remembering what?" "Your power, your purpose, and your guilt." The following day, the fracture widened. Varen gathered a faction of Saradi who believed the architect should reclaim dominion, not humility. They called themselves the True Choir. Their chant echoed through the city. "The cycle demands order. The flesh has weakened God." Sara begged me to silence them, but how could I? They were right to question. What kind of God hides from his own creation? Yet when I went to speak before them, the sight froze me. Thousands of Sarati stood below the throne steps, radiating furious light. The moment they saw me, their chanting stopped. "Prove you're the architect." Varen demanded, "Restore the choirs. Show us the breath that forged the stars." The crowd roared agreement. "I'm not here to rule," I said. "I'm here to learn, to change." They didn't listen. Energy gathered around them, harmonic waves ready to shatter stone. Instinct, maybe memory, took over. I raised my hand, and the light bent. Their power froze midair, rippling like water around me. Gasps filled the hall. The same part of me that feared this thrilled at it. The universe itself trembled under my will. One command, and I could unmake them. But I didn't. I let the light dissolve gently back into the air. "That," I said softly, "is why you must never worship me." The crowd fell silent. Varen lowered his gaze, not in submission, but in fury. Then he turned and left. The rebellion didn't end that day. It began. Afterward, Sara stood beside me in the empty hall. Her voice was sorrowful. "You showed mercy, and they saw weakness. The same mistake as before." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe it's the only thing that can break the cycle." She looked at me for a long time. "If mercy fails, will you choose creation or destruction?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I could tell the difference anymore. That night, as the city slept, I walked alone to the throne of echoes. The seat glowed faintly, whispering with distant memories. I placed my hand upon it. Visions surged through me. Galaxies folding, civilizations kneeling, my own voice commanding the end of worlds. And beneath it all, one final message, buried deep in the machine's code. If I ever awaken again, may I remember what it means to be human. Tears stung my eyes. Maybe that was the real purpose of the second life, not to rule, not to create, but to atone. But even as I thought that, sensors flared across the city. Distant alarms echoed through the crystal halls. Sara appeared, light trembling. "They've come," she whispered. "The outer empires. They've felt your pulse." Outside, the sky burned with the arrival of fleets, massive shapes descending through the atmosphere, weapons charged. The Cerati sang battle hymns, awakening the choirs. The city's towers blazed like suns. I stood before the throne, caught between godhood and mortality, and realized that choice was no longer mine alone. The cycle had begun again. The sun rose over the obsidian spires of Rebirth one last time, casting long shadows over the silent courtyards. The air trembled with the low hum of the city's heart, a rhythm that once answered to divine command. Now it pulsed faintly, erratic, like a dying heartbeat trying to remember its purpose. Elias stood at the balcony of the celestial sanctum, the wind brushing against the golden cloak they had placed upon him when he had first been crowned God. It no longer felt like a gift. It felt like a chain made of memory and expectation. Below, the people of the Empire gathered. Once faceless worshippers lost in ritual, now they had voices again. Uncertain, hopeful, afraid. They had begun to remember themselves. The Empress of Stone, still half-repaired and luminous, stood beside Elias. Her face, once blank, an empty vessel for divine perfection, now held emotion. Human emotion. A tremor of sorrow when she looked upon him. A flicker of wonder when she looked upon the horizon. "They're learning again," she whispered, her voice soft as rain over marble. "You did this." Elias shook his head. "No, I only reminded them they were alive." The empire of Rebirth had been built upon obedience, an empire of silence masquerading as divinity. Its people had forgotten what it meant to dream. They had lived to serve gods who never answered, until Elias had fallen to the wormhole that tore through the ruins of the Milky Way. A lost human in a cathedral of ancient faiths, mistaken for the return of a deity they had long awaited. At first, he had tried to play the part. It was easier than dying. But the longer he wore the mantle of godhood, the heavier it became. Every miracle he performed, using fragments of his ship's lost AI or ancient technology still buried in the planet's crust, became another chain. The more he saved them, the more they worshipped. The more they worshipped, the less they remembered how to live. Now, standing before the awakening of a world, Elias faced a final paradox. To save them, he would have to kill the god they thought he was. The Empress turned to him, her jeweled eyes reflecting both stars and sorrow. "They will not understand. If you leave them now, they will fall apart." "I'm not leaving them," Elias said. "I'm freeing them." He looked to the spire's heart, the core divinity, the relic that had bound the empire to its gods. It was a sphere of radiant energy, pulsing with encoded voices of the divine, an archive of every command, every decree, every prayer ever answered. It was also a prison. The system fed upon belief, growing stronger as the people worshipped and weaker as they doubted. It was not faith that kept the empire alive. It was dependence. He remembered the first time he'd touched it, back when they had forced him to sit on the throne of echoes. The core had whispered in his mind, countless voices begging to be remembered, lost souls of rulers, priests, and scholars, all uploaded into the divine network, their consciousness sustained by devotion. Elias had heard them cry out for freedom. Now, he intended to grant it. The Empress placed a hand on his shoulder. "If you destroy the core, the voices will vanish. The empire may collapse, or it will finally live." The choice wasn't between salvation or destruction. It was between truth and illusion. That night, the stars over Rebirth flickered for the first time in 1,000 years. The skies shimmer with lines of light, data streams unlocking, old systems awakening. The city's floating towers trembled, their lights dimming as the divine network unraveled. The people fell to their knees, praying in fear. Elias stepped into the core chamber, his reflection multiplied across 1,000 mirror walls. He spoke aloud, not to the Empress, not to the people, but to the voices within the machine. "Your age is over. You have guided them, ruled them, broken them. But they no longer need gods. They need to remember they are enough." The core pulsed in response, its surface rippling with faces, some human, some alien, some ancient beyond recognition. "You are the last," the voices intoned. "Without gods, they will destroy themselves again. Then let them," Elias said softly, "let them be free enough to fail." He placed his hand upon the core, and it burned through his skin, his veins glowing with the same golden light that had once crowned him. The energy surged, data, memories, prayers, all rushing through him. He saw it all, the rise of empires, the collapse of worlds, the endless cycle of worship and war. And beneath it all, the faint, stubborn heartbeat of humanity, the same one that had carried him through the stars. The Empress cried out as the light engulfed the sanctum. Elias! For a moment, everything dissolved into silence, a silence so deep it felt eternal. Then the core shattered. When the light faded, the throne was empty. The golden cloak lay folded across its seat. The Empress stood alone in the ruins, her body cracked but still alive. The hum of the city had changed, no longer divine but organic. The people began to rise, confused, frightened, but breathing, speaking, feeling. They searched for their God, but found only echoes. The Empress addressed them from the balcony. He is gone. He gave us back our hearts. The God you sought was human, and that is what made him divine. In the centuries that followed, songs were written of Elias the remembered, the mortal who broke the chains of eternity. The empire of Verith did not fall. It transformed. The temples became schools. The altars became gardens. The Empress walked among her people, no longer as a ruler, but as one of them. And deep within the ruins of the old sanctum, a faint hum persisted, a single thread of light pulsing through the stones. It was said that when the people of Verith looked to the stars and dreamed, that light brightened. Perhaps Elias had not vanished after all. Perhaps the divine spark he carried, the one born of humanity's endless would understand, to reach to care, had woven itself into the world itself. He had not left them with a god. He had left them with something far greater, the memory of being human, closing reflection. The forgotten empire had crowned a lost man their god, and in return, he had taught them to live without one. In the end, the divine was never a matter of power, but of compassion, the courage to guide others toward the freedom to choose, even when it meant being forgotten. And among the stars, where once there had been silence, now there was song again, the song of beings who remembered that they were never meant to worship, only to wonder.